as the government explore ways to get AI to risk score benefit claimants. More on that later too, plus this.
People often confuse white privilege with being wealthy or being rich, and it isn't about that. What it's about is the absence of having to live with the consequences of racism.
So here we go again. Schools now using the hard-left Marxist ideology that is critical race theory to try and winkle out unconscious bias in their pupils. Some say that by doing this, schools are potentially breaking the law as well. We'll look at that story in more detail. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on TalkTV, 0344 499 1000. So, here's the thing. Can the BBC come back from this now? It's day 5. We still have no clue as to the identity of the BBC man at the centre of the what started off as a cash for photos allegation. Well, we do know who it is, just not officially. There are now more stories. I think there's another 3 since this began. This is the direction of travel. As it goes on, there will be other people coming forward with their stories of communicating with a high-profile name. We have the initial allegation, of course, which, if true, could actually be a criminal issue. We've now got a second person who's come forward talking of an exchange on a dating app which allegedly resulted in the presenter threatening the young man after he said he would expose him. We've got another story of secret meetups during lockdown. Some of these not as serious as the first allegation, but they build a bigger picture. Older people meeting youngsters on social media and dating apps might not be anything new or even illegal, but inevitably it commands a certain kind of response. Cries of dirty old man, hypocrite if they're married, of double standards if their image is one of an upright citizen rather than a serial sex hunter who craves meetups with people 40 years their junior. That's how people tend to respond to this kind of thing. It's mucky, it's dirty, it's dark. You wouldn't want to read that about your own dad. It's not illegal, but it's a grim lifestyle. So if you're accused of that and it isn't you, you can see why you have the hump on that. You can see where the problem lies. And day 5, here we are, people still posting and pointing the finger at the wrong people. It's extraordinary. I always thought our fellow citizens by now knew that the den of iniquity, the cesspit that is social media, particularly Twitter, comes with rules and regulations, but apparently not. Today, as you heard, Jeremy Vine has come out and suggested the person should now name themselves in order to put a stop to this. You heard his words there, and in a corresponding tweet he said, "I'm starting to think the BBC presenter involved in the scandal should now come forward publicly. These new allegations will result in yet more vitriol being thrown at perfectly innocent colleagues of his." And the BBC, which I'm sure he loves, is on its knees. And he makes a point. Can they come back? The BBC, 0344 499 1000. That is where you will find us. Let's get a word on this and a few other stories of the day from James Heale, political correspondent over there at The Spectator. James, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
It's not going away, this one, is it? Day 5. I mean, it's got all the ingredients for it's a tabloid story with booster rockets attached to it, but it, potentially goes beyond that. Big implications as well for the BBC.
Completely. And yesterday, Tim Davie, when he was doing the press conference for the annual report for the BBC, which looks at things like high pay for star presenters, etc., all of his questions were directed about the identity of that BBC presenter and what the BBC knew and when. And now the Met Police are talking about, they're going to be looking at whether they can launch an investigation into it. So it's not going away anytime soon.
And one would assume that even if there is no illegality in this, and it's entirely possible that this is mucky and murky and a bit dark, and as I said a second ago, you wouldn't want to read it about your dad, but it might not be illegal. One would assume, obviously we can't name the person or the particular job they do and department, etc., but, they're an on-air talent. That would be tricky for that person to come back even if there wasn't anything illegal going on.
Yes, completely. And I mean, we've seen the latest revelations today about what they were doing during lockdown, etc. I mean, on a slightly separate field, my field is Westminster, and so what's been happening recently with the Privileges Committee and the accusations that some of Boris Johnson's Partygate critics were themselves doing things in lockdown, and the Met Police were looking into that as well. So clearly, perhaps, as you say, Ian, even if the story on Friday might not be the one that gets investigated, there's also issues around other behaviour which will be looked at in the due course of time.
Yeah, and I don't know, I can't imagine this person naming themselves. I don't know, think it would be extraordinary. The person has been named in foreign press now. So yesterday we read that 1 in 6 or 1 in 10 people know the name. That's about 10 million people. Now we know that it's any foreign publication, which we can all read online, can name the person. I mean, it's becoming a bit stupid now.
Completely, and I do think this will again lead to those kind of annual calls for reform to privacy laws and changes in terms of how we report these kind of things, because there's a sort of vacuum there. And then you had this kind of weird reverse Spartacus thing where everyone was standing up saying, well, I'm not him, I'm not the presenter involved. You've seen Jeremy Vine today come out, you've seen that Gary Lineker, etc. And so you've got to wonder, I mean, I've talked to people at the BBC, and the culture in there at the moment, morale is on the floor, because they know that all these accusations going around, they know who it is. But, there's no sign of it going away anytime soon.
Indeed. And I wonder whether the Director General made it actually worse, not better, with that curious appearance on Radio 4 yesterday.
Yeah, no, I think there are definite questions about Tim Davies' future in all of this. Just when the people thought the BBC might be getting back on the right side after, good performance at the coronation, all those questions around Gary Lineker and Richard Sharp have gone away. We've now got this whole thing. And did the BBC act in the right, proper way? Some there don't feel it did.
Indeed. Let's come back to your patch, Westminster. Big complications and, of course, lots and lots of controversy over the illegal immigration bill. We know, James, that this was the House of Lords were not happy. They threw out a load of areas and amendments. I think there were sort of 15 points they wanted sort of addressing. That all got kicked into touch by the Commons. It now goes back to the House of Lords. It's all straightforward stuff, this, isn't it? And in the midst of all of that, former Prime Minister says she's not happy either, Theresa May.
Yes, so I was there in the House of Commons last night, and it was 18 divisions back-to-back, 4 hours or so of voting. And that's because the Lords put down so many amendments, because the strength of feeling on this is just so high. As you say there, Theresa May made a speech in the debate that preceded that. She obviously was talking about her legacy of modern slavery, and her concern is, well, we want to do legislation which is just going to be about these small boats, but what about other people who come here, etc.? And the difficulty with law is that, there's not much kind of, grey areas here, black and white. Yeah. So we're now seeing the ping-pong between the two houses. You've seen some concessions. So, for instance, you can now only hold children in detention for 8 days rather than 28 previously. But I suspect that it's going to mean a showdown on Tuesday night and probably an all-night sitting in the House of Commons. Yeah.
So in basic terms, Theresa May's contention is that people coming over the Channel on those boats, it's all very well saying, well, just send all of these people to Rwanda, which probably isn't going to happen anyway, but that's the theory. But her contention is that among those people will be some victims of modern slavery.
Yes, and even they might not be on those small boats. They might have come from other means, into the country, etc. Or they might have been trafficked here and they'd be living in kind of conditions which we would call modern slavery, and they'd be kind of swept up in all of this. Yeah. I think that's the real issue here, is that I think, most Tory MPs are voting for this bill not with any great enthusiasm necessarily, but because they do have real concerns about what it sends, and it's trying to act as a deterrent. And I think the concerns are genuinely felt on both sides, and it's really about trying to muddle through and address them. And that's why we saw about 15 Tory MPs yesterday voting in some of those amendments against the government.
Indeed. Final one on mortgages. This is another story that isn't going to go away anytime soon. In fact, this story could actually get worse before it gets better. But we read today that, which for many people will be not just a terrifying but an impossible figure, where up to 1 million people could discover their mortgage rate increases by 500 quid a month. And for many of those people, James, that simply won't be doable.
It won't be, and that's why you're going to see repossessions likely rise as well. I mean, look, the whole debate here is about, what the Bank of England took action on inflation. Did they do it soon enough? Because you've gone from 0.1% interest rates in December 2021 up to 5% as it now is. There's a lot of suggestions that the next time they raise the rates, they could raise them even higher as well. And that poses real difficulty to people trying already with the cost of living pressures to, pay back their mortgage, etc. And it means, of course, politically, it's going to be very difficult for the Conservatives. A lot of homeowners are unable to pay back those mortgages.
Yeah, spot on. James, great to have you on. Thank you. James Heale is political correspondent over there at The Spectator, looking at those big stories of the day.